Jan Cruikshank, you joined me from Aberdeen. Now, we met back in June. We did a mobile video workshop. You were somebody that I was very excited to train. You had a story that you needed to tell. It had been on a mainstream media news publication, so people were aware of your story and where you live in Aberdeen. But it's not something that was repeated again. And I know the frustrations when you are a victim of injustice or abuse, you might get that story into a newspaper or onto the television news, but then that's it. It's there for a day, but the after effects, the aftermath of, you know, what's happened to you continues. And I know that you've got out of signing a non-disclosure agreement, and you've been campaigning for changes to the system for other people who went through what you did. You were a victim of a sexual assault, you alleged rape in a workplace, and you're the one who ended up suffering and losing your job, and the perpetrator remained in employment. I know you feel incredibly angry about this and are doing everything you can to raise awareness around this issue. So where are we at now? And if you can, just kind of remind people a little bit about what happened to you.
Okay, I raised a claim at work for sexual harassment, which ended up resulting in a really serious sexual assault by my colleague. Initially, I found it extremely difficult to tell, and I actually disclosed in stages. Because I didn't come right out and tell everything straight away, I was immediately discredited by my employer, who insisted on calling me a liar and backing the perpetrator by saying that he claimed it was a consensual affair and that I was a vindictive, spurned lover who just wanted to get him into trouble. It was extremely distressing. I had evidence to prove that I was telling the truth. I'd repeatedly asked him to stop, and I'd even sent him an email detailing what he'd done that had upset me and why I didn't want him to do it anymore. He sent me back a reply telling me he was sorry and that none of this was my fault, and yet the employer still managed to make it out that he was the innocent party and I was the one that was causing all the trouble. It was very damaging. I think people tell you all the time that if you come forward and disclose that you will be believed. I certainly didn't expect them to believe me without evidence, but I didn't expect to be absolutely dismissed over the whole thing. The way I was treated was inhumane. I was spoken to like I had made it all up and I was some sort of crazy woman that was just out to cause trouble. The ordeal that I went through was horrendous and resulted in me finishing up that I was suicidal. When I lost my job, I couldn't believe the injustice of it all. And I also couldn't believe how the company could get away with dismissing me and then paying for me to go away. They tried for almost 2 years to get me to take a settlement with a non-disclosure agreement. I refused point blank because I knew that what they'd done to me was wrong. And I fought it because I wanted people to know the realities of what actually happens when you report abuse.
I want to interrupt you now. You got out of a non-disclosure agreement and you're on Twitter and Facebook trying to tell the world what happened to you. You were vindicated. Your evidence stacks up. It was in the media. But where we're at now, you know, people may or may not be aware of your story. You were sexually assaulted by a colleague at work and you fought back and you got out of a non-disclosure agreement, which means you can tell your story, but now you're still out of work and you are suffering for telling the truth.
Yeah, I finished off that I had no option but to settle out of court because financially I couldn't afford to fight it. The legal fees were just far too much for someone with no income to sort of find for themselves. Initially the union supported me, but they reached a point that they said if I didn't accept a reasonable settlement, then they would withdraw their funding. As a victim of a sexual assault and a gross injustice at work, nothing to me was a reasonable settlement. £50,000 was what they paid me after tax, which didn't even cover 2 years lost income. I now find myself more than 10 years away from retirement age with no income, no career, a damaged reputation, and I find it hard to move forward because...
Well, wait a second, why do you have a damaged reputation? And that's what's so scandalous here. You are the kind of person that industry and organisations should champion, because you are standing up for injustice and abuse and saying this is not acceptable. There are thousands of people every day who are suffering, not necessarily sexual assault, but some kind of bullying or injustice. They may whistle blow, they may stand up. Very often what usually happens is, you're right, they get the union involved, they sign some kind of non-disclosure agreement and take money, and then things quieten down and they go for another job. You were in a situation where you were saying, no, I want the system to change. I'm going to shout about this. It got out into the traditional media and the newspapers where you live, but you are still suffering. And like you say, your reputation has been tarnished. Do you actually think that your reputation has been tarnished? And if you look back over everything that you've done, do you regret that? Because for me, that's scandalous and a horrendous situation, that the people that do stand up and shout out are the ones that then feel, oh, I've made a mistake, I'm now suffering, I'm now damaged, I've now damaged my reputation for standing up for what I believe in. Do you regret it?
No. I had no option but to tell, because I was in a situation that I couldn't carry on going to work with someone who had done this to me. I actually suffered a mental breakdown that it was physically impossible for me to go to work. And the only way out I could see was to tell, so that I wouldn't have to work with this man anymore. I do feel damaged in respect that by speaking out, I'm now seen to be a troublemaker, because I won't toe the line and just fit in to what conforms. I feel that by speaking out, it's probably put off prospective employers, because they'll now see me as someone who will raise an issue if I don't agree.
Let's look at this. You were sent suggestive text messages. It went on for years. You did everything you could deal with it in a manner that you could. I mean, you initially, I believe you said to the perpetrator, I really don't feel the same way. You were very, very clear right from the beginning, and you didn't raise a grievance and didn't tell your management for some time. You tried your best to contain the situation. It got worse. You were sent massive photographs of this individual naked. He then sexually assaulted you, and you alleged rape as well, and that's been reported in the media. And you feel that you're seen as a troublemaker for basically saying, this is what's happened to me. I want to keep my job, but I've lost my job and now I'm out of work, and everything, my whole life was falling apart because of someone else's behaviour towards me, which basically was a horrific crime. It doesn't seem fair to me that that's the situation you find yourself in. Do you know if this person is still working for the CITB?
No, he no longer works for CITB. There was a reshuffle and restructuring of the company, and I believe that he took a golden handshake early retirement package to discreetly walk away from the situation with his reputation intact.
Do you think that they were aware of, obviously, the negative press around what's happened with your story, and he had to go?
Possibly. I know they were certainly aware that I wasn't the only person who had highlighted his behaviour. There was a conversation that I had in writing with another member of staff where she also said that he'd been sending her indecent text messages, pressing himself up against her and behaving really inappropriately. But unfortunately, when push comes to shove, most women don't want to speak out about this because you're deemed to be a troublemaker and you're labelled, and I think you're tarnished once you raise something like this. It's almost like the old boys club where you're not seen to be playing the game if you don't play along with it or tolerate the behaviour.
You've done a lot on Twitter and Facebook in trying to get your story out and really support other individuals, men and women in the same situation as you. But this isn't a story at the moment that has a happy ending, because you stood up for what you believed was right, got out of this non-disclosure agreement, and you are now out of work, and the individual who did it to you has now got a pension and a golden handshake, or whatever you want to call it. You know, his situation isn't the same as yours. He's in a better place than you are. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. I feel that he's been rewarded. I feel that the company covered up for him in order to not admit liability of damage or wrongdoing to another member of staff. It was much easier just to deny that anything had happened and allow him to walk away. I was most concerned that he was working with vulnerable groups, and his disclosure agreement will remain untarnished as well, because the company didn't take it seriously. This man has been allowed to carry on working with vulnerable people with absolutely no blemish against his name.
You did get a £50,000 settlement. They did apologise, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. I received an apology, a reference, and £50,000 with Treasury approval after tax.
Would you go back and work for that company again?
No. You could never work for a company that accuses you of lying over being raped. At the very least, I expected a fair hearing. The grievance that I went through, I was asked, why had I not said no more than once when he exposed himself to me? When he was interviewed, he was never asked why he had exposed himself to me in the workplace. He was never asked why he had behaved the way that he did. The only questions that were asked were, how did I react to his behaviour? As though it was normal for someone to expose themselves in the workplace.
What we've got to say now, and I don't know if you feel it's going to make a difference in the future, but we do have these platforms now. We can publish and get our message out. So, you know, when you were first treated this way, they may have thought to themselves, oh, Jan Cruikshank just has a small following on Facebook, some family and friends. She's probably not going to be active on Twitter. She's not going to know how to communicate via video to reach the masses. She's not going to embarrass us, and this story is not going to get out. It did get out. It was in the papers for just one edition. But you're pushing and pushing on Twitter, Facebook, I call them new media platforms, and you are getting your story out. Do you think that they have been damaged, or their reputation has been damaged, and they are scared that you are continually you're vocal about what happened to you?
I still feel that I'm just a small voice in a large world, and it's extremely difficult to be heard. And I feel that although it was published in a national newspaper, it was one day, and the rest of my life is empty, because I have no career, a career that I loved and I was very good at, and it's all been snatched away from me. And in no way does £50,000 compensate for that.
What would you like to happen now?
I would like my life back. I would like the life that I should have had. I would like to be able to get up in the morning, go to work, do a good job, feel like I'm making a difference and pay my bills. I shouldn't have to be screaming out to people on social media to listen to me because what happened to me was wrong. All I wanted was to be heard, to be believed, and to be listened to. And I believe that that's all I can do now on social media. But I also am aware that it somehow makes me unemployable, because there's a conflict of interest to employ me in an industry where I have spoken out against a sector skill.
So you're working in Aberdeen. If you are doing any work relating to that industry, it might be seen as that you're, yeah, I can understand that. That compensation didn't really go anywhere near, did it?
No. I mean, to let you understand, the legal process takes so long that it was 2015 I reported this to work, and it was November 2018 before CITB finally settled with me. So by the time that I received the settlement, I was already in debt due to losing my job. So the settlement money was swallowed up paying off the debt that I had accrued by not having an income.
Do you have some criticism of the union as well, who represent?
Yes, but I think it's more the system as a whole. I think the system is flawed in that companies can sack you and then realise that all they have to do is give you a reasonable sum to go away. and then they're never held accountable. There's absolutely no legal obligation on them to investigate the wrongdoing that you initially reported. If they decide that they want to get rid of you, they can get rid of you without any proof or evidence. And then they decide, when you appeal, the company that dismisses you decides if your appeal is fair. And then when it goes to court, they can stop it actually reaching court by financially pushing you out of the equation. There was no way that financially I could fight a company with over £90 million of a surplus. There was no way. I mean, they were going to price me out at every occasion, and that's not justice. What kind of justice system is it where you can buy yourself out of accountability? It's wrong.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't know where we're at now in terms of, there are so many people who are in your situation who are thinking, do I go down this route or do I just stay quiet? And they're probably going to stay quiet, because this is what happens when you do stand up for what you believe in. But one thing you do have, and you should be incredibly proud of, is integrity. And you could have just gone quietly with the money, but you wanted justice for yourself and for other victims, and to be people to be aware of what is actually going on in these organisations.
Oh, definitely.
I'm proud of that.
It's not just about me. There are hundreds of other victims. Once you go onto social media or new media and you reach out and tell a story and say, this is wrong, this is what's happening in our society, others reach out and respond and say, me too. And this is long before the Me Too movement that I raised my grievance. But since I went public, the amount of people who have contacted me saying, this happened to me too, I whistle blew, I reported wrongdoing, I lost everything. And it's not just a financial loss, it's what you lose part of your soul when you go through something like this. And it's absolutely wrong. And had I not have had the backing and the strength of my family behind me, I would most likely not be here now.
100%. What you want a job? You need to be in a new job, being busy, being part of something that you love, like the job that you had. And I hope that there is an employer out there who can see what an incredible asset you would be to their company, and a beacon of light, somebody who stands up for the truth, stands up to the bullies, and was just basically a really decent human being that deserves something far, far better than what life has thrown at you. And
Thank you, Anna.
You're looking for work now. So if you do have a message to anyone, and a potential employer, what would you say?
I could add value to most companies because I'm dedicated. I love doing good. I like making a difference. I have integrity, and my only flaw was that I forgave this man. I made allowances for him and forgave him for having poor boundaries. And if I could change anything, it would just be not to be so naive and not to be so trusting, because when I made excuses for him, he just turned it around and blamed me for everything, when in actual fact, I didn't want to cause harm to anyone. So therefore, I'd probably let it run on too long before I reported it, because I didn't want to get him in trouble. But the end result was, in order to hide what he is, he blamed me for everything. And I just think, I believe I'm a lost CITV because I was a good worker. But unfortunately, their protecting the company name meant more to them than losing a dedicated employee.
Yeah, that's basically what it is at the end of the day. And there are so many other organisations probably have done exactly the same thing. But all I can say is thank you for your honesty and for your bravery. And I wish you all the best of luck in finding a new position that is equally as fulfilling and rewarding as the one that you had at CITB.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for listening.